Aloha, thank you for those who are joining us early. I will be launching our poll. This will help us know who is calling in from which island, how many farmers we might have, ranchers, ag enthusiasts, ag service providers, educators. We really want to know who's on our call today. As I was just explaining to our panelists, who you can see right now, everyone's joined us, they're on mute, but we really want to make this interactive. We all want to hear from farmers and ranchers. All the tools and programs and plans that we're discussing today, they're all to serve you guys. And so we really want to know, what information do you want to see? What's valuable to you? So we will be soliciting information from you today, as well as providing you some really good material. Okay, so we will just wait for everyone to filter in. So thank you for those of you who are joining us with the Hawaii Women Farmers Network. This is part of a summer soil health series. This is the last of our 4 workshops. I am going to let everyone just filter in. We have not officially started yet, but I do see that we have mainly Oahu calling in today. Okay, so we'll wait and just see. We have a nonprofit represented. So everyone can view this poll. Hopefully it's somewhat interesting. Looks like people are eager to offer input about what types of information they find useful in the soil health plan. So that was in response to what people want to learn from this workshop. Okay. All right. I see we have a few more attendees on today. We'll wait a few minutes for an official start before we really dive in. You will notice, for those who are kind of settling in, that there's a chat function. You can use this to communicate to all the attendees and panelists. There's also a Q&A function. These we're going to use separately. The Q&A is going to allow us to answer some of those burning questions that you have in the middle of someone's presentation. So we had stressed earlier that hearing back from all the farmers on the call today is very important to us. This is going to be a lot of good information that we'll share with you, but we really want to have this be a two-way street. So we really want to have everyone use this Q&A function. So we can go ahead, and as everyone's settling in, we can practice this. The Q&A will be an icon that you see at the bottom of your screen. You can see that Louise has basically posted a question here. The simple question is, who loves soil? So we can upvote on this. So hopefully everyone's soil geeks here today. So as an attendee, if you can see that question, please see if you can upvote on that as well. Let's see. So let's go ahead and try that. If you agree that you also love soil, please select the thumbs up, and that will allow you to upvote. That's great. So our panelists will be able to see these questions, and they'll be able to answer questions. So the format today will be that we'll hear from all of our speakers, but we will then hold a Q&A, a live Q&A 20 minutes at the end of the session. So this Q&A function that we're playing around with is to be used during presentations. It will be recorded. It's very valuable information. It can be informal. Any question that you have, we have some amazing experts with us today. So if you're an attendee, please go ahead and post any questions you might have. Others can view this and upvote on it. This can be answered verbally at the end during our Q&A session, or it can be answered by panelists via text. So this will kind of allow us to expand the feedback that we can receive. I see we have Maui represented today. We have most of our farmers appear to be new farmers, so less than 5 years. We have some ag enthusiasts and some backyard gardeners and homesteaders. And we also have nonprofits represented today. As far as what we want to learn out of the workshop, it seems that people really want to learn how to establish a baseline, set measurable goals for improving the health and function of soil on their individual farms. People are also interested in providing some feedback and letting the panelists today really understand what types of information that farmers in Hawaii would find useful on soil health plans. We're also People want to learn about resources and tools to support soil health testing and the development of soil health plans. Okay, I will keep this poll up here. Please, everyone, fill it out. We're going to also launch one at the end of the presentation. This helps us measure any improved understanding and any of the material we cover, especially number 7. If anyone is kind of being shy on this poll, if you're going to fill out any question, please fill out number 7. And that is, what information would you value most in a soil health plan? This is all geared for Hawaii. Hannah will delve into this more deeply during her presentation, but please, out of these different kind of information that we have entered into question number 7, please let us know which of that information would you find valuable in a soil health plan. So we will keep that going. Okay. It's now 10:04. And so Augusta, will you please share the screen so that we can start our presentation? I'm going to start as people still filter in, just kind of giving you a little background on the Hawaii Women Farmers Network and Oahu RC&D. Okay. So we'd like to welcome everyone and get started. So thank you for joining us this morning for our webinar. This is the last of our 4-part series. It is really focused on integrating practices and setting up for a soil health plan. So for those troopers out there who joined us for all of the past 3 workshops, this one really integrates everything together. So we covered kind of, the 101 of soil health. We delved into some in-field assessments at Hua Orchard. So some simple in-field observation and tests that farmers can do. We were able to demo that. Then we were also able to look at the practices of cover cropping systems and organic fertilizers and do some simple tests to understand how do we know if those practices are really working and how do we start trusting those practices and adapting our nutrient management systems. So that is what we covered in the 3rd workshop. And today we're really integrating it all and really focusing on what are the resources and tools and programs that will help us test for soil, monitor improvements over time, and what is a soil health plan? So we really want to look at a systematic approach to bring all this information together. So yes, thank you for joining us. My name is India Clark, and I work as the Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator for Oahu RC&D. I also have our team members, Augusto and Louise, on the call today. Louise will be monitoring our Q&A panel. Augusto will be hosting our presentation, so all the panelists will have to prompt him with the next slide, and Hannah will be presenting as one of our panelists. She's also worked with some of our panelists through her grad work. So we have a full spectrum of interest in our audience today. Thank you for all those who are filling out the poll. As I mentioned, the format for our workshop will begin with presentations from each of our speakers, followed by a 20-minute Q&A. So we really want to hear from you. Next slide, please, Augusto. Okay, so next slide. Okay, here we go. So we are able to see our speakers today and our learning objectives for the workshop. So in case you want to know, what am I going to come out of this workshop knowing? Here's some bullets. This is what we'll be covering. A little bit about ORCD. So let's go ahead and switch to the next slide. Our main focus here is really environmental stewardship on working land. So we work with farmers, ranchers, and other land stewards by providing technical assistance, fiscal sponsorship, and really facilitating farmer-to-farmer learning around topics of watershed restoration, soil health, agritourism, and agribusinesses. We are a nonprofit, and although we're based on Oahu, we do service all islands. So next slide, please. One of the main ways that we support farmer-to-farmer learning is really through our Hawaii Women Farmers Network. So it's a learning network. It connects women producers and ag professionals regionally and across the islands. Farmers in our networks are really continuously trying different practices, because a lot of this is really about, trying different soil health practices, keeping good records, monitoring, and then just seeing what's working and sharing that out through this network. We also have a Facebook group. So if you go onto our website, you can join the Facebook group. That's where a lot of the informal learning happens. We have over 650 members across the islands. We saw a lot of new members over COVID. So this slide that you're seeing is really kind of our website. As you come on, you get to see who we are, what we do. So we will go to the next slide. One of the main things that we've been able to create this year is a Hawaii Women Farmers Network directory. This was funded by Hawaii Department of Ag, and it allows users to access, support, and connect with female agriculture producers, makers, entrepreneurs, and leaders in our community. So you can actually go on the website and sign up and register your business if you're 50% or more women owned and operated. So we want to make sure that you serve a leadership role and decision-making role in your ag operation. This network is able to really feature the products and the operations of farms across the islands, but it's also used to connect and find farm mentors. Okay, next slide, please. We also have some online tools. And so as you can see, we have one that is a Regenerative Ag Tool. It's really focused on soil health, and it largely pulls from Nrcs's in-field soil health assessment workshop, which was largely developed by Dr. Jennifer Moore. She presented during our first workshop. So it's really a fun quiz. It helps you generate a customized list of what resource issues you have that could be related to poor soil health and reduced function of your soil. So I encourage everyone to go and try out this tool at the end of our workshop. As a reminder, before we get started, you can help us make the best of this time together by posting your questions to the Q&A panel. So don't be shy, even if you want to just throw something out there, get the party started. So we will, Augusta, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we will just dive in with Dr. Bianca Mobius, I'm bad with names, Mobius Clune's presentation. She is the director of the National USDA NRCS Soil Health Division, and I believe you're joining us today from Washington, D.C. Is that correct? All right, so thank you very much. We're very honored to have you today. So her workshop, her presentation is really focused on NRCS's resources to support soil health planning. So this is a big program. It's a very exciting time for us. I'll let Bianca really explain where we're at with that nationally, and then we'll get into more where we are regionally in Hawaii. So she has authored numerous peer-reviewed and extension publications and provided workshops and training nationally and internationally. She has conducted research on agriculture management impacts on soil health, and has worked in the Northeast, Midwest, as well as Kenya, and developed a new framework for soil health management planning. So this is really helping us get around this. And she holds a PhD and master's degree from Cornell University and a Bachelor of Science from the University of New Hampshire, all in soil science. So we have some great experts here today. So she is also joined by Amy Koch and Rachel Seaman-Varner. They will kind of chime in at the end for the Q&A session. We're very lucky to get Bianca. She's got a very busy schedule, and she had an engagement that we knew about. So we will get to hear from the full national and regional NRCS staff during our Q&A. Bianca's presentation will provide us with a background on NRCS's approach to soil health and the resources they provide for farmers like you and also ag service providers. So Bianca, I'll let you go ahead and unmute yourself and start your presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks everybody for being here today. Really excited to be here. I have to say, I've never been to Hawaii, and I hope that at some point, once the pandemic is done, eventually I'll make it there. I hear it's beautiful. I know Amy gave a wonderful presentation on one of our conversations on soil health recently, and that was much more specific to what you all are dealing with. So what I'm going to do today is provide sort of a larger context. Next slide. I think, agriculture is really a goal and a mechanism to improving not just agriculture itself, but resources that we need as human beings, right? And so NRCS provides a lot of those resources. And so I want to sort of give you a little bit of overview of context and then go through some of the programs, some of the technology transfer activities and training that we do, a bit of the outreach that we do in a very short presentation. And then I'll let some other folks get into more detail about how you would apply that on the ground. So next slide. I want to bring this up. I just think this is such an inspirational quote. This is by the father of NRCS, Hugh Bennett. Back a long time ago, he said, if we are bold in our thinking, courageous in accepting new ideas, and willing to work with instead of against our land, we shall find in conservation farming an avenue to the greatest food production the world has ever known. And I think that was true then, it is true today. And it is just so inspirational to think about this. If we're bold in our thinking, if we allow ourselves to think outside the box, and if we allow ourselves to think beyond what we may have learned so far in farming, maybe what our parents did, maybe what other folks have done around, and we allow ourselves to think creatively about how to do things a little differently, there's amazing things that we can do with our agriculture for everyone. So next slide. A little bit of background on NRCS. The mission, the tagline of the agency, helping people help the land. I think we all kind of know what that means, right? We're looking to make the land productive, environmentally sustainable, and economically sustainable as well. We all know farms are businesses. You have to be able to subsist and not just subsist, but do well. And so this agency was born out of the Dust Bowl when we were losing a lot of our farmland because we hadn't treated it well. It's about voluntary conservation. The agency has a lot of boots on the ground to really help one-on-one with personalized advice. And I think you really see that with your NRCS staff on the ground in Hawaii. They can really bring a lot of that financial and technical assistance on how to get things moving. We maintain the conservation practice standards. We provide a lot of science and technology acquisition and transfer. And we also implement the nationwide soil survey as an agency. And so there's a lot of resources there that you all can make use of. Next slide. The agency is very committed to soil health, and it's really uniquely positioned to work with all these partners like the RC&Ds and many other partners across the country on soil health management systems. I think it's, if we look at the goal of adopting soil health management systems, if that could be our new conventional agriculture, what kind of change could we make, right? If we had floods and the water went into the ground, instead of running off and eroding everything with it, what kind of change could we make across the world, right? So these kinds of things, I think the agency has a lot to give there in terms of how we can move soil health management systems forward. Our commitment is really based in the realization that biology drives soil function. There are more living organisms in a handful of soil than there are people on Earth. That's a lot of life. It's a megacity under your feet. And that biology drives just about everything about how the soil functions and how the soil grows your food, how the soil takes in the water that does fall, how the soil holds that water for the next drought and those kinds of things. There's been growing customer demand for systems that are really adapted at the local level, right? So we have our principles, but at the local level, how do you really put it on the ground is very different for all the different soils, production systems, climates that we have across the country. NRCS defined soil health as a priority back in 2014, created the Soil Health Division in 2014. We staffed it up and we have been really meeting the national needs in training, technology, transfer, policy, technical, and strategic leadership for the agency. So we are continuously working to increase that technical and outreach capability of our staff as well as our partners, and that's part of what we're doing here as well. And one thing to note is every single state now has a soil health strategy. So if you have not seen the Hawaii state strategy for soil health, make sure to ask Amy. She would be able to share with you what's on that. And I think all of these strategies are always really open to producers providing their input. What is it that you need? How is it that you can better implement these practices? That's a really big piece of how NRCS works with its customers. So we're really wanting to work with partners and producers across the country to implement soil health. Next slide. I just want to briefly put that up. I won't go through all of it, but if you think about soil health as having the goal of being a win-win for soil health management systems to really become commonplace for all of these different benefits, when we implement our soil health management principles of minimizing tillage, minimizing disturbance, maximizing rooting, maximizing diversity in the system, so not just plant diversity, but animal diversity, microbial diversity, diversity of inputs, maximizing soil cover. As we implement those principles in a way that's adapted to the location to work in that system, we can really start to build soil health, and we go from changes that are not very visible, soil organic matter starts to increase, nutrient cycling starts to increase, to changes that become very visible, like infiltration increasing, more water being stored, our crops being able to make it through very difficult, very challenging weather, especially as the climate is changing, and field conditions becoming more resilient, more consistent, and more predictable, and thus we then have better crop yields, better quality, etc. Next slide. We have the conservation planning process. Another one, I just wanted to put it up here. The 9-step process of conservation planning matters greatly within NRCS in terms of how we bring a partner, a producer through this process. Soil health management planning fits into this process. Next slide. We have a number of programs that we've established over the last year. We have soil health management planning, which is a conservation planning activity that includes steps 1 through 7. So assessing your resource all the way through what is it that you're going to do, determining the objectives, identifying the resource concerns, formulating what the alternatives might be that you put on the ground. And then soil health implementation, that design and implementation activity, step 8 of the process, how to actually get it implemented on the ground and make that successful. And then evaluating and monitoring, we now have soil health testing. We have a technical note for 5003. I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. And we have a new conservation evaluation and monitoring activity, as it's called, that's specifically about testing the soil and determining that baseline of soil health and evaluating over time. Next slide. Soil health testing. As I said, so we've got a technical note that kind of standardized what our current best available methods are. We are adding methods as more researchers provide more data. We are working with ARS and a number of other entities to bring all those data together and provide interpretations. So what that means, you all may be familiar with nutrient testing. In a nutshell, if you test and you have low phosphorus, well, you add some phosphorus, right? And that fixes the problem. You have low pH, you add some lime, that fixes the problem, right? Your plants can grow better. Well, what if your aggregates are falling apart? Now what do? That's what soil health testing is about. All the different functions of the soil that are biological and physical in nature haven't in the past been available to be tested by our standard public service laboratories. And so we're starting that process. The agency is now able to provide financial assistance and technical assistance for that. We're integrating that into our programs, and we're really seeing that when farmers are seeing the issues, our aggregates are falling apart, microbes don't have enough food to eat. As we start to really put data on that, we can then say, okay, well, what management practices will address those specific problems? And that's what that's about. As part of this, we are also building a soil health database, which is pretty exciting. There's a number of database products that the agency is currently building. In a nutshell, what it will allow us to do is to bring in data from all across the country in a standardized format and learn from all the partners, all the producers, everybody who contributes to that database to really provide interpretations that are based on your soil, based on your production system, based on the climate, to say, okay, well, if you have 30% aggregate stability, what does that mean? In some soils, it means that it's really high aggregate stability, and in some soils, that's really low. So we're working on those interpretations and on tying those to practice standards. Next slide. Another program that recently started, this came out of the 2018 Farm Bill, we now have annual funding for on-farm conservation innovation trials, which is really exciting because these trials are really about getting science on the ground, having producers commercially produce their products with these new practices and report back to the agency how that's working. So there are some basic data set requirements for the soil health demonstration trials. There are about 10 million going to those on an annual basis. There are a number of priorities. I think it just closed yesterday for this year's. And it's exciting because for the first time ever, the agency is actually compiling a standard minimum data set from all of our conservation innovation grant projects that are part of this, contributing to that national data set and therefore allowing us to better integrate that into soil survey and therefore make it available to everybody out there. Next slide. Another new thing, we have an interim soil carbon amendment practice standard. We have not in the past been able to provide funds for biochar amendments and compost amendment that was limited. So now we can provide technical and financial assistance for that, specifically for the purpose of improving soil health. We recently had a conversation on soil health, number 13. I don't think we have it quite up on YouTube yet, but that should be coming shortly. There's also a number of resources on biochar out there, and it's just one of the many tools in the toolbox for improving soil health. When you have especially very warm and very wet climates, organic matter tends to degrade very rapidly. Biochar is very resilient in the soil and will stay around for a long time. And so that's just as one of those tools in the toolbox, it can really help improve the system. And so can compost, of course, and combining that with cover cropping and no-till and crop rotations and integration of livestock and these kinds of things, you can really get your soil to function a lot better. Next slide. Another piece that we've been working on, we've been working with Nrcs and a number of universities and the cover crop councils on developing cover crop decision support tools. The Midwest was the first to put such a tool together. There was a lot of Nrcs involvement in that. We recently were able to get the Northeast tool live. There's work happening on a Southern tool and on a Western tool. I believe that Hawaii is currently involved. I don't know to what extent, but there's definitely always opportunity to be involved. So if you're a producer and you would love to contribute to providing your cover crop knowledge, providing insights on what's working in your very specific climates, that can be incorporated into those databases. And the goal is to build a national decision support tool where there's some consistency about how the tool works, about how we get all of the partners, all of the experts together to agree on what the best current state of the science is, but then to have it give very locally adapted information to a producer for their particular system. And so don't have that available to Hawaii at this point, but there's a lot of really exciting things coming. Everything from selecting the species to when to seed them, what rates to seed them at, to economic calculator and an adaptive nitrogen management tool. All those are at various different stages in the works. Next slide. Just some products in terms of outreach. One of the things we fairly recently put out there is a soil health how-to series for the Southwest. They may not apply as much for depending on where you are in Hawaii, but just as an example of very diverse production systems with farmers who are talking about what's working for them, what kinds of thought goes into them adapting soil health management systems to their land. These are all producers who are working in regions where previously the going was, well, they can do that in the Midwest, but we can't do that here. And so that's one of those paradigms that I always like to push back on and say, you know, if you think you can't do it here, just somewhere else, I'd like to always encourage everybody to say, no, actually, how do we do it here, right? How do we do it in this system? How do we do it in that system? And I think working together, we can always come up with the next step, the next adaptation to really move these systems forward and make them work and for everybody to learn with each other. And so I'm really excited about this network because I think when all of you female farmers can all talk to each other, can all share what you're learning and can learn the challenges, learn the successes, learn what isn't working for someone, brainstorm together how to fix it, learn from each other's successes and apply that, you know, there's a lot of strength from that. I think very often producers really learn best from each other and from seeing what somebody else has seen work in on their farm. Next slide. We have a soil health basics training that's basically the same 3-day training as what we provide to our staff for specifically technical service providers, those folks who are helping the agency put soil health management plans on the ground. We delivered one course so far in April. It worked quite well. If there is interest, we will be happy to plan that again in the future. And so we're hoping to put more of these national level trainings on. So definitely if there's interest, to the RC&D, to your network, let us know if there's interest in that, and we can put you on the list to make sure that you get announcements of any upcoming courses. Next slide. I want to plug our conversations on soil health again. That's been a really great outreach tool for us nationally. It was prompted by the pandemic to really connect with our staff across the country and help them continue to learn about soil health when everybody was locked down. We've kept it going. At this point, every month, generally, we have one of these conversations. They are open to the public. We record them and we make it available on YouTube once we've done all the internal reviews and all that. So we've had a number of different series, a number of different topics. Just last week, we had the conversation on cover crop management when there are nematode issues involved. We've had one on biochar. We've had those representing and serving historically underserved producers, how our plant material centers work, and a number of other topics. So I think you'll find some interesting ones in there if you're interested. Next slide. All right, so with that, I am here for some questions and discussion if there's time for that now. I will kind of be in and out for the Q&A session in the end. I do have another commitment that I need to get to, so I'll sort of be since I'm online, I'll sort of be halfway listening in and then going on to my other commitment. So I will still be available, happy to answer any questions, and also of course Rachel Seaman-Varner, our National Soil Health Specialist, and Amy Coach, who has worked with a number of you, are all also on and probably more able to answer questions than I am. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all, and I wish you all the very best at implementing soil health management systems. It's really exciting that there's so much excitement about that. So all the very best.
Thank you, Bianca, for such a great presentation. I think we're all pretty pumped up now. It's really pretty interesting to just know where we're at in this time when we haven't been testing for the physical and biological properties of soil. So a lot of us farmers out there, we religiously test for nutrients, for the soil fertility, but this has been a pretty fun topic to really delve into and get in the field. So thank you for really stressing that point and how many opportunities there are right now, and just how some of our local information can help join the national learning network. So thank you so much for your time. I really encourage everyone to use the Q&A panel below. Bianca, if you wouldn't mind kind of looking at that, you could answer some questions via text as we move on to the next presentation. So that is an opportunity. Those questions will be recorded, and we will try to address those that people upvote on during our Q&A session. Okay, I would now like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Susan Crow. Her presentation will really focus on soil health testing as a management tool. So I'll let that sink into everybody out there, but soil health testing, as we mentioned, looking at the biological, physical, and also the chemical components of soil, and how you can use that as a management tool. So integrating this into your practice. Dr. Susan Crow is an associate professor of soil and ecology and biogeochemistry in the Natural Resources Environmental Management Department within CTAR. And she's also an affiliate of the Water Resource Research Center at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She studies the natural carbon cycle and human impacts on the soil environment, and serves on our local state greenhouse gas sequestration task force. I think we have a few other attendees today that are part of that, so thank you for joining us. She's also part of the North American Carbon Program, the Carbon Cycle Science Interagency Working Group, and she's an associate editor for the Journal of Biogeochemistry and belongs to the American Geophysics Union, Soil Science Society of America, Soil and Water Conservation Society, and International Soil Carbon Network. Her presentation will really speak to Hawaii's soil health indicators. So what are those indicators that show us the status, the health status and functionality of our soil, and also introduce some tools that you as farmers can start to use. So again, very exciting nationally where we're at, and also locally. And this is all, again, to support farmers out there. So I encourage everyone to, go ahead and post as many questions as you have. And Susan, I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself, and we're excited for your presentation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, aloha. Thank you for having me. Thanks so much for the introduction. So I'll talk a little bit about specific indicators we've developed, particularly out of the thesis of the next speaker, I believe, Hannah Eubanks, your own. And I'll also quickly take the time to make the link back to some of the things that Bianca was just talking about. It's so amazing to go after her. Part of the work that I'll share today are the Hawaii specific indicators and what it really means to adapt some of these national level initiatives here to Hawaii's very unique soils and agroecosystems. And so Bianca did mention the Soil Health Database and Data Hub, logging dynamic soil properties for soil health. So my research group, I'm the person that gets elected to do these things, but I don't do the work. My team does the work. It's a large group, but our group has been funded to work directly with national level Nrcs to collect those dynamic soil properties for Hawaii. And then the second thing she mentioned is that the Conservation Innovation Grant Program that does soil health demonstration trials. We were recently funded to participate in those trials, and so we are contributing Hawaii systems and data to that minimum data set that she mentioned. So just a great opportunity to really place that national context here in Hawaii, and just let everybody know that we at Manoa are working with the national level as well as the local NRCS to ensure that Hawaii is in those databases and really represented. So with that, I'll just kind of jump right into it quickly. I know I'm supposed to go fast, but again, acknowledging that this is a group effort, and all of you outreach and extension and farming partners are a very, very important part of that research team. Next slide, please. So adapted from Hannah's thesis, we do have a list of 11 proposed Hawaii soil health indicators. We still say proposed because we are undergoing the process of verifying them, and I'll describe a little bit of what that process is. But we started this effort with taking a step back and looking at Hawaii's landscapes and agroecosystems, and really thinking not just about selecting a list of 10 indicators, but asking the landscapes, what does a healthy soil look like here in Hawaii? And so we took a survey approach. And so the survey really looked at 5 key land uses here in Hawaii: protected forests, both native and non-native, pastures, organic croplands, conventional croplands, and a lot of the unmanaged, previously intensive agricultural lands, which may now be in shrub or grass or forested systems, and measured, I think, 46 different indicators. And then we deduced down to this list of indicators that you see on the slide. One of the questions I saw from the audience ahead of time was, if there's one indicator that indicates soil health, what is it? It is % organic carbon. That's carbon comprises 50% of soil organic matter. And if I had to pick one, that would be the one. So we put it at the top because it holds biological, chemical, and physical benefits. And so otherwise, this is our list, and this is available to you. Next slide, please. So what exactly are these indicators of? They've been referred to as dynamic soil properties, and that really makes them different from some of those inherent chemical and physical properties that we're more familiar with. In terms of the dynamics, that's really where biological indicators kind of are getting the most attention, where they've been kind of backseated in the past. Now they're getting front and center. Chemical properties also can change. So those are dynamic as a result of changes in land use or management practices. And also some very specific physical parameters can change as well. And so here I just give an example of one biological, one chemical, and one physical from the list that I showed on the last slide. One of those is a 24-hour CO2 burst. So what is that? What is it an indication of? It is your soil microbial response to available substrate that's there in the soil. A high number means that there's more microbes and they have access to more nutritious organic matter. So there's a burst of activity as a result. One of the chemical parameters that you might be more familiar with is pH. You can manage to change pH, and so it's considered a dynamic soil property. So this regulates both biological and nutrient availability, and there's an optimum. So it's not necessarily higher is better in this case, but there's an optimum where essential elements are most available and toxicities are lowest. So in the physical list, we had water stable mega aggregates, also something that Bianca just mentioned, right? So this is an indicator of soil structure. A healthy soil structure is good for water infiltration, porosity, aeration. And in this case, a high value means better water relations, much more dynamic, right? It means improved root growth and habitat for microbes. So you might notice that biology came into play in all three of those categories. So that's why sometimes you hear about so much emphasis being on biological. But it really is biological, chemical, and physical properties all together. Next slide, please. And so there's interest in using testing. So these are parameters that you can submit a soil sample for and have these parameters measured, at a certain point in time. And so measuring these parameters over time can help you track changes. And so one of the things that our research group is doing with the support of USDA and the NIFA research funding is developing a web-based tool to serve really two purposes at the beginning. One, to help people like yourselves, farmers in the community, and our outreach partners to track changes over time. So part of this is enabling you to understand soil health and then actually log into this system and eventually be able to request soil health testing. And so we have this web-based portal that we're still in development. Next slide, please. And so when you utilize this web-based tool eventually, one of the things you can do is request a soil health test. We're still researchers at this point, and so what we're trying to do is collaborate to make this more of an open public service, but the web portal is active and you can use it and be in communication. And so with the soil health testing, what that means is that you collect a soil sample. We will always have to collect a soil sample, right? And then you can get that soil sample to a testing lab. And from that, we can make those measurements of those 11 indicators and then eventually develop that out into a soil health score or one index that sort of combines all of those metrics, and whether higher is better or whether there's an optimum and you want to match that optimum. The idea is that one number may be able to tell you whether you are poor, fair, good, or excellent, and then you can track that over time. Next slide, please. So the idea is that every agroecosystem has potential for improvement, right? The idea of this index is simply to help make improvements entirely depending on where your soil is at the starting point and what your goal is. And within the different land use categories. So past land use matters a lot, current land use matters a lot, and we have very different soils here in Hawaii, which I'll go into a little bit in the next slide, but not quite yet. I'll talk about this one. Generally speaking, there's some level of soil health. And on this slide, we're plotting relative soil organic carbon. So as I said, if there was one indicator that we were going to focus in on, that's the one. And so you can think about the amount of soil organic carbon prior to cultivation was 100%, quite high. What that absolute value is entirely dependent on what soil type you're located on. But if prior to cultivation is your benchmark, Then in a degrading system, sometimes intensive cultivation over time and monocropping systems have degraded soils over time, results in a decrease in soil organic matter and an associated decrease in soil health. And so if we are currently, where we're at a current level in a degraded system, so if there was past intensive agricultural land use history where you are now farming, then implementing one of multiple options will see you upgrading your soil carbon and soil health over time. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is help you no matter where you're at to begin implementing changes to upgrade soil health and soil carbon over time. All right, now next slide. So as we all know, Hawaii soils are not equal, right? So what is that benchmark, and what are those aggradation goals over time? One really important thing is to understand limitations of your soil. So the three main categories that we think about in Hawaii are high activity clays, low activity clays, and then the poorly and non-crystalline clay soils. Vertisols, mollisols are one. These are your sticky shrink swell soils. Oxisols, ultisols are two. Those are the deep red in color, deep, highly weathered, low fertility soils. And then the antisols are volcanic ash soils. Next slide, please. And so what that looks like, you can start to see in the data. So we have on-farm trials going, as I mentioned, as part of the CIG. We don't have data from them yet, but here are the data that I can share with you. And this is where you can really see that depending on the Hawaii soils, it's really matters in terms of what you might expect from a change in management or different managements in terms of measuring those indicators. So this is for vertisol, shrink swell, sticky soils. You can see that compared to grasslands, you have a decrease in total organic carbon and CO2 burst and water stable aggregates if you're in a conventional system. And in terms of organic cropland systems, you have an increase in that middle graph there of CO2 burst. And so this just gives you an idea of what the data can actually show you. Next slide, please. Next slide has the same set of data, but now for an oxisol. So the absolute amount of these are quite different, but you still see some of the same patterns. In terms of total carbon, CO2 burst, and water stable aggregates, there are less in conventional than in unmanaged systems. But in organic cropland systems, you can see a significant increase across all three. So this is a more responsive soil in terms of the benefits of organic farming to each of these soil health indicators. And finally, next slide, please. Those of you who may farm on andisols, particularly on the Big Island, although there's a little bit here on Oahu, largely we have data from unmanaged versus conventional farming. And you can see that these soils in particular are very sensitive to degradation as a result of intensive conventional management. It's really important to implement good management practices in intensive cropland systems such that you don't see these declines in the soil health indicators. Next slide, please. And so I will just end here with a question that you may have: where can I get more soil health info? This is specific to Hawaii. We have our web-based tool link there. We also have an outreach blog that you can get to directly from that website, or you can get to it by clicking on the button on our web-based tool. And I will just say thank you. And if you can go to the next slide, I'll just leave it at that. An acknowledgement to our funders. And thank you to all of you for working so hard in Hawaii's agricultural systems. It's great to meet you all.
All right. Thank you, Susan, for such a great presentation and really helping us understand what tools are out there to help us better know and understand our soil resource. It's really encouraging to see the potential of how, our practices, our stewardship of the soil can better produce healthier crops, and how that can translate into the health for our families and communities. So very excited about the learning community you're kind of facilitating around this better knowledge of our soils and really getting to know our places. Before I introduce our next speaker, I really want to give some attention to our Q&A. There's some great questions. And so any panelists that want to answer this, you can answer via text. If you have been upvoted on, And I think one that's very important that Ari and Valerie both posed were, how are we looking at supporting and sharing some of the soil health practices, the indigenous soil health practices that we have here in Hawaii, because we have such an amazing heritage of amazing agriculture systems, both on land and in the waters. And so, I think, Ari, you had mentioned on-farm learning, and this is something that we're definitely starting to do. I know there's some subgroups within our Hawaii Women Farmers Networks that are specifically with more Pacific Islanders. So we have so much knowledge, generational knowledge and practices and principles that we definitely want to support, because the result is really healthier communities. So thank you. And then panelists, if there's any more direct resources that you want to put out there, that if there's any opportunities to kind of plug into national and international learning groups with Indigenous communities, we'd be grateful to hear about that as well. Okay, so our next speaker is Hannah Eubanks. So Hannah did work with Susan, as Susan had alluded to. She is our conservation planner and soil health specialist here at Oahu Resource and Conservation Development Council. She actively works with farmers, land managers, and local stakeholders to improve soil and water resources through conservation planning. She also coordinates the Waimanalo Watershed Restoration Project, which when we get to see Hannah's picture, her background is the Waimanalo Watershed. She also works on a project which focuses on co-managing food safety and land stewardship, and a carbon farming project. She's originally from Wisconsin and earned her BS degree in zoology. After time abroad and working in a variety of science disciplines and ecosystems, she arrived in Hawaii and took interest in global and local challenges within the food system. She focused on soil health assessment in Hawaii for her master's thesis work also at UH Manoa in the NRAM program. And she looks forward to carrying out the mission of ORCD by promoting a more sustainable Hawaii. So Hannah really has her pulse on the conservation practices. And Hannah, she'll, as Bianca kind of explained, we got this kind of wide scope on what's the national resources to kind of support testing and plans. Susan shared kind of the local testing resources, and now Hannah's going to really share and speak on what is a soil health and how will it be helpful for farmers in Hawaii. I'll let Hannah delve more into this, but this is probably one of our most interactive components, because we're at a phase now where the soil health plans could look many different ways. And based on some of your feedback today and this continuing conversation that we'd like to have through different learning platforms, maybe Susan, through your blog and through other Hawaii Farmers Union and our WFN network, we can continue this conversation to really understand, what information would farmers value in a soil health plan. So without further ado, Hannah, I'll let you go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. India, thanks so much for the introduction. And thanks, Bianca and Susan, for launching this conversation. Yeah, my name is Hannah Eubanks, and I think India gave me a good intro, so I'll just leave it at that. Next slide. So today, as India mentioned, I'm just going to go over some of the basics of what a soil health plan looks like and what we think it's going to look like in Hawaii as of now. I want to share some future opportunities for those plans with you guys at the end of the presentation. And I really want to explore the feedback from you guys that are here today to help shape what we're thinking those plans are going to look like for us, because as she mentioned, we're definitely in exploratory phases and we want to incorporate things that are meaningful. So yeah, I'd just like to also start by sharing the current status of planning in Hawaii. So while anyone is welcome to make a soil health plan for their own farm use, we do not actually have that type of planning that is qualified and eligible for funding right now to be used in Hawaii. But it is actively being organized and it's expected to be available within the next year, likely sooner. So right now, Oahu RCND is piloting a project to create soil health plans as that future service for producers. And that would also be eligible for funding through the Nrcs EQIP program. But we need help right now to tailor that template of our future plans so that they're actually worthwhile for you guys, and that, if we put in the effort in to create them, there's something that you really want to receive and you're getting something valuable out of it. So because we're in that phase right now, it's really important we get your feedback. Hopefully we can get that today. And if you want to email us and follow ideas you have, that's welcome too. Yeah, we'd just like this to be really relevant to what you guys are experiencing, because that's who we're doing this for. So just keep that in mind as you're listening today. We'll ask for your feedback at the end. Next slide. So, I got a little bit of background from the Nrcs introduced earlier in this presentation from Bianca, but there's just a definition I want to share with you guys of what a soil health management plan is. And it is the identification to document soil health resource concerns and develop a transitional cropping management plan to improve overall soil health. The plan includes management activities and/or land management practices to address all 4 soil health principles associated with crop and forage production. And we've covered a lot of this stuff in the previous series workshops, but in case you weren't there, I wanted to just kind of cover what some of those are, and what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about primary purposes and goals of a plan. So this is what it really is. We want to improve soil organic matter levels. We want to reduce compaction. We're trying to improve the soil organism habitat. We are trying to increase the aggregate stability. We're trying to improve plant productivity and health, reducing sediment transport to surface waters, and reducing sheet and rill erosion. So when you really think fundamentally, what is this plan going to do? That's what we're looking for. And just to bring it a little closer to home, those are great purposes, but you're thinking, how can you take a more bite-sized approach perhaps in addressing those? And what's something that's going to make sense for you to wrap your brain around when you're like, what can I do in the next 5 years? Here's some examples of some of those in greater depth. You might be wanting to increase your soil organic matter by 1%. You might want to improve your score for soil compaction by 10%. Those of you that were in the field with me a couple of weeks ago, we demonstrated the penetrometer. So that's one way that you can, really measure that compaction. You might have a goal to increase the diversity of the crop rotations you use or cover crops from 1 to 3 species. And you might decide that you want to install some practices that reduce runoff and sediment in high areas of risk. Next slide. So I really like using analogies for soil health to bring some of the familiar perspective that we have about other areas of our lives into the process. And I've come up with this one that I like regarding soil health plans, which is that it's like getting a report from your doctor after a visit when you're sick. So, the first thing is you go in, you have some symptoms and you're not really sure what's wrong. You might have an idea. And the next step is the doctor meets with you, talks with you, and identifies the cause. And they take some tests and things like that. And then together you develop a treatment plan. And there's lots of other steps between that. We've all been to the doctor. We know how many other steps are involved. But I like making an analogy to that, to our own soil health plans, because it's really similar. You have some symptoms on your land and you share them with the planner. The planner identifies the cause. They might run some tests, they might talk with you, really similar to going to a doctor and having that similar type of appointment. And eventually you develop a soil health plan. So just like a treatment plan, you're developing something that's going to address those symptoms. So while that's a great analogy, it's also really important to remember that planners do not have access to the same diagnostic tests that we have for our bodies. And someday we might, but they're just not at that level yet where it's really black and white and easy to do. So you might have some level of them, but there's also a lot of development to be made. And that's a lot of work that Susan's doing right now, is to just really quantify and kind of tune in that process of what we would consider like a diagnostic test. Instead, the planner uses causes from tools that they do have available, like what you guys may have seen a couple weeks ago in the field when we did the in-field assessment. And they also use their professional experience, which we all know is not a black and white process. So often the planning might require some trial and error, and really just saying this because, there's a lot of room for error, and it's important to be mindful that we're all learning this process, and it's not a perfect process, but we can get to some general conclusions as we kind of work through those together as a planner and farmer team. Next slide. So some of those examples of poor soil health, in case you weren't at our in-field workshop, I've listed here. And Examples might be that there's ponding in the field for more than 24 hours after a rain. You might see some soil crusting. That's that second image there where it's physically crusting on the surface when it's exposed. You might notice that you cannot penetrate the soil with a thin metal flag. And I say that instead of the penetrometer because I know that you guys don't own penetrometers, but most of you have metal flagging. And in that third picture, those should go into the soil pretty easily in a healthy soil, but it's a great proxy for something more complex. And so you can kind of be like, oh gosh, I can't even get this little flag in. Something's really wrong. And a fourth symptom, loss of soil in areas that are exposed to wind. You can physically see soil moving in the air when it's windy. There's lots of other soil health indicators or symptoms that things aren't going well on a visual sight basis. But these are just a few, and here's some of the solutions. So if you have ponding, you might have compaction, and you might need to be working on the soil structure to improve that. So you might want to incorporate a reduced till system. If you have soil crusting, it might be due to overexposure and not having enough microbial life and plant growth in there, so you might want to increase your plant cover. If you have compaction and you can't get something through the soil easily, you probably don't have enough fluffy organic matter, and you might want to incorporate some compost to start building that organic matter back. That's also a compaction issue, right? And then if you're having loss of soil, you might want to consider planting a windbreak to reduce some of the speeds of wind that you experience during those events. Next slide. So what is in a plan? Once the planner has visited with the farmer and some concerns are identified, the process of planning begins. And many, the plans are going to vary a lot based on purpose, but you'll likely find the following basic components inside of them based on what the producer is looking for. So I think it was mentioned by Bianca that these are developed by a technical service provider. And as a side note, that's why we're not quite at the point of having soil health plans available in Hawaii right now, is we're still in the process of getting technical service providers available to do these types of plans. So that's in process. But once there are, technical service providers will be the people who will be able to make those plans that are comprehensive and qualified for the Nrcs standards. So continuing on, some of those components that you're going to see in a plan, you're going to see an inventory of resource concerns. So that might be listing things like I just did, like there's soil erosion, there's plant degradation, there's soil degradation because I can tell there's compaction. So these are indicators, and they're resource concerns to the water, to the soil. And once you make a list of those types of resource concerns, you're also going to identify the conservation practices that will address them. So that's kind of like the treatment to the symptom, right? It's the pairing or the thing that goes with it that we think is a good solution, like I listed in that table. You'll also see in your plan maps of the property. So that's going to include everything that's there visually from an aerial photo, and then drawing boundaries, and I'll show a template example of a picture of that in a further slide here, but really picking out where those existing and proposed practices are going to go that is recommended by the planner, and other types of environmental conditions like how much precipitation you get in the area, your soil types, which we know is really important. And then lastly, the producer may or may not include an inventory of activities specific to their operation. And we recall this is a 9-step process. So the planning and the content for the document is generated each step of the way. And sometimes you go back a step and adjust things, but generally we're following this process as we go through it. Next slide. So you'll probably ask what kinds of practices are used. I've listed a couple and, as I speak previously, but it's just really important to remember that there are solutions to soil health concerns and symptoms, that there's really like infinite possibilities, because the farm operation, the soil type, the crop, the landscape, it's all going to create something unique to that situation. And there's just not going to be one size fits all of, this is this, and this is this, and this is what we implement to fix that. Still, there are some practices that are really commonly used that I've listed here, like conservation cover, which is kind of a permanent long-term cover. That could even be like just having grass somewhere rather than bare soil. Rotating crops, reducing or eliminating any sort of tillage, using cover crops, implementing mulch, applying compost, using a prescribed grazing system, and a critical area planting. So those are just from my personal experience. I use these all the time in conservation planning. They're things that seem to work for a lot of people in Hawaii, and we've had good success with them in improving soil health. But there are 30+ practices that are considered suitable. And we can go next slide. Here is the full list. I could foresee this being changed in the future or adapted, because there are a few things here, like there isn't a windbreak listed, and I think that could be something really helpful for soil health in the future. So, this is not be all end all list, but it's what we have right now of what's considered eligible for a soil health plan. And when I say eligible, I mean it can receive funding from the federal entity. So you'll see there's lots of different types, and there's the primary on the left, and that's like really what we want to focus on. We think it's the biggest bang for your buck. And then the stuff on the right is the supporting practices. So that's stuff that maybe doesn't have a direct effect on soil health, but it's supporting the practice that we're going to do next. Next slide.
A minute.
Okay, thanks. So here's an example of how those components in the plan may come together. So Farmer Jan shares with the planner that she's having issues with the soil erosion during rain events. The planner identifies there isn't sufficient ground cover in the areas where the water tends to travel, and there isn't very good soil structure. So in the soil health plan, the planner proposes a conservation cover and vegetative barrier to help slow water in certain areas and encourage infiltration, and also proposes compost amendments and reduced tillage to improve structure. So that's a very oversimplified version, but that's kind of an example of how that would work and what you could see getting remediated. Next slide. So also with that soil health plan, that was just a very miniature plan. The producer will receive a plan, a map that would look something like this, where the fields are identified on the map, and the legend shows where each of those recommended soil health practices will go. So you can see the items in the red are those that I've identified that might correspond to a soil health goal. Conservation cover, for example, I mentioned earlier, that's something that could reduce erosion, and you can see that's in a lot of areas on this image, which are not the fields. So that's really important because they're maintaining some soil cover in areas that are not being used regularly, and it's sometimes kind of an easy thing folks can do with having less impact within the field. Next slide. So what are the challenges? Soil health plans are a useful tool, and they can improve the farm's productivity and conservation efforts. Why isn't everybody doing it? We've touched on this a little bit before, but I think it's really important to share these lessons learned from the work that we've already done to paint a clearer picture of the challenges we face and be able to anticipate how we're going to navigate them. So I've listed a few of the things here that have been problematic for folks sometimes that I've worked with that are trying to achieve some soil health goal. And it's really important that you kind of start to think about this on your own farm and, thinking through what might limit me from improving my soil health. What do I need to be really mindful of making sure isn't going to be the breaking point for me? So some of them I've listed here, like funding, labor, pests, equipment, land ownership, all things that could hamstring you if you're kind of not sure how to make the next step. And I can answer more of that in detail if you guys have questions of what I mean by any of those. I want to be mindful of your time here and move along. But overall, the farmer is making an investment, and it's going to have inherent risk because this is never going to be black and white, and that must be accepted. So that acceptance of whatever the gain is going to be must outweigh the risks, and that's only something that the farmer can decide. So understanding those risks is really important when you're considering taking that leap and doing something that could really improve your farm too. Next slide. So if you're interested in a soil health plan, as I mentioned, Oahu does not yet have a system for creating these soil health plans in a way that's going to be funded, but there will be some options soon. So the first one is the long-term funding that is anticipated to be available through Nrcs to cover the cost of a plan and to fund the implementation of proposed BMPs for soil health through a specific soil health planning program. So that's EQIP. And like I said, we need more TSPs in the state, and we will be launching a program next year to help get some TSPs trained up so we can have more of these. But generally the way that works is the farmer hires the TSP, which is the technical service provider, develops the plan, NRCS refunds the farmer is eligible for funding for those practices. And just as a side note, those plans could be developed for the benefit of improving the operation independently. So like I said, if you don't want funding, there are going to be options for developing the soil health plans. But if you're only interested in funding, we're just not quite there yet, but that will be soon to come. And then the second option here is what I've mentioned of ORCD. We will have short-term grant funds available to cover the cost of a plan and potentially the cost of some BMPs, but we're still working on the logistics of that. That'll be next year. That will be really launching that in full, possibly some by the end of this year. And just recognizing those are different types of plans with different benefits, but they both will have a similar outcome. Next slide.
30 second.
Okay. So in the meantime, if you're interested in a plan and you just kind of want to hold out until that service is very professionally available to you, you can start making observations about what symptoms your farm may be experiencing related to soil health. And to do that, you can utilize the tools and resources available on our website. Also, the tools and resources NRCS provides through their in-field assessment, which we have available linked to our website too, and help identify what those are going to be. So it's a great way to start being observant and get started. And then find out what others in your area have done to resolve similar issues. So using that Women Farmers Network space that you're tuned into and figuring out what others have done. And you can also start soil health testing to get an accurate baseline. So speaking upon what Susan had, this lab testing can provide a level of detail to track progress beyond what field testing can do, such as % changes in carbon. It's very accurate, and it's also a way to just really notice those small changes that you might not be otherwise visually able to see over time on a small scale. And then lastly, testing might help you identify what component of the soil is in the greatest need of remediation first, providing a clearer picture so that the planner is more equipped to work with you. And Bianca did a really great job explaining that in her presentation of, phosphorus deficiencies are one thing, but knowing that you don't have any aggregate structure is a really important thing you would learn from the soil health test. And that really informs the planner of, okay, structure is really an important thing here. There's great presence of microbes, but we don't have enough structure. Next slide. So lastly, this is going to kind of launch us into our audience question. And hopefully you guys took the poll, but if we have time and India thinks there's space for it, we might be able to do an open kind of Q&A for this too. I just really want to remind you guys to, if you didn't do the poll, submit your answer to this in the chat, please. We really want to know what kind of information you want to see in a soil health plan, what format for that information is most useful, and the spatial planning of those practices. Is it identifying the soil health improvement opportunities? Is it the cost information? Do you want someone to be in the field to take that soil health assessment for you? So just give that some thought and plug some answers in if you can. Next slide. And those are just the ways you can stay in touch. So I think I'm out of time and can just leave this here. But if you're interested, make sure to stay in touch with us. That's how we're going to share all the grant opportunities we have. We post them all to our media. And there are some target regions that are going to be most eligible for those plans. So we'll be launching the poll, it looks like, again, India says, so you can chime in there, but just to be mindful of the opportunities we have coming up in the future listed here. Okay, I think that's all I've got, and I think I've ran out of time. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Hannah. We're pretty excited to kind of have some continuation to this conversation we're having today. So, some of our attendees raised some interest in different workshops, on farm workshops they'd like to host. Hannah just gave some different opportunities that we'll have for those who would be interested and have some kind of background in becoming a TSP. And then also, how we'll be able to work with some farms on all islands. So we still have Hannah's slide up, and you can see some of the target areas we're going to be able to start working with. So I'd like to introduce our next speakers. They're going to kind of co-host, and they're going to talk a little bit more about regional resources, specifically through the each island's and each region within each island's soil, water, and conservation district. So if you're not familiar with your local SWCD, it is a great resource in addition to Nrcs and our organization, and all the farmers as well. We're all plugged into this network together. So it's pretty exciting to see, all the different knowledge and applications that we we have here as part of our network. So I would like to introduce Amanda Shaw. She was raised on the windward side of Oahu, specifically Waimanalo, and her work over the past 15 years has focused on economic development and social equality in the field of international development, trade, and ag. So she's got both her pulse on the global and local. And she's recently joined Oahu Agriculture and Conservation Association as executive director, and she manages the West Oahu SWCD. Michelle Gorham-Dasick, she's really been with, she's really the heart of OACA, and she really enjoys the opportunity to leverage community assets by developing targeted training, strategic partnerships, and comprehensive education initiatives that advance ag and conservation here locally. With more than 15 years experience advancing Hawaii's conservation, stewardship on working lands, she encourages innovation collaboration, which they'll both be able to kind of share with us through some of their programs that they'll share today. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have some of the other SWCD representatives on the call today. I saw Barbara Anderson was on there, and I believe we might have some others that I'm not aware of. So I just want to give space real quick for them to share on some of the soil health related projects that they might be working on neighbor islands. So yes, please start, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, India. Yeah, we'll kick it off. I'm Amanda Shaw, and thanks for the introduction. We're so pleased to have myself and Michelle here, the outgoing director of OACA, who has had the historical knowledge of the West Oahu district programs. Next slide, please. So basically, we want to tell you a little bit about what the soil and water conservation districts broadly can do for your work on farms and soil health. So we'll provide a bit of history about the conservation districts, where they come from, and then we'll speak a little bit from our experience in the West Oahu district, and of course, welcome any other districts on the line to chime in afterwards. We'll also talk about how you can become a cooperator and secure a conservation plan. And then we'll talk a little bit about a program we've run called Together We Farm, which blends together information and training on different soil health and other management practices. And we'll give an overview of that. Next slide, please. So there's 16 soil and water conservation districts across the state, and we come together through the Hawaii Association of Conservation Districts. And these are really, I think as background has been given, established partnerships working with those who are working on the land, farmers, ranchers, and landowners, along with non-governmental organizations such as OACA and ORCD and many others. And then we also often have connections with schools and community groups as well, all in the service of conserving soil and water and promoting sustainable land management practices in our district and beyond. Next slide, please. So at West Oahu Soil and Water Conservation District, our mission is to coordinate and facilitate these different partners, helping to identify and implement projects that assure the protection of the environment. And we'll go through some of the activities we do in that vein. And this is a photo from a landowner assistance workshop that we did recently. Yeah, next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to Michelle to give us more background.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you here. So Bianca shared a little bit about how the history of Nrcs got started and as a soil conservation service. And just like them, we were started as a result of the Dust Bowl, which was a time of black blizzards and severe dust storms when even the dust was moving across the Midwest all the way into the windows and the walls of the legislature. And they realized that something needed to happen and something needed to change. And they realized that the government wasn't necessarily the best way to do that because they wanted to ensure that there were trust-based, community-based relationships at the heart of soil and water conservation, because the people who are working on the land tend to know the best about what the best practices could be. We have a lot of experts who can guide those practices at the NRCS level, state level, and with great groups like Oahu RC&D, but the heart of the farming is the farmer itself. So the Hawaii State Legislature authorized the creation of SWCDs in the 1940s in concert with the rest of the nation, which started authorizing soil and water conservation districts in the 30s and 40s. In January 4th of 1950, I almost said 2050, of 1950, West Oahu Soil and Water Conservation District was born. In 1967, the state decided to tie some funding to that by appropriating funds and directing the Department of Land and Natural Resources to support the districts. And then the city and county, this is where it gets really interesting, of Honolulu revised ordinances authorized a conservation-based permit exclusion process. And that's why a lot of the farmers that we work with are interested, because number one, they want to support best management practices, but not only is this working to advance long-term successes on their farm, but it also secures them a grading, grubbing, and stockpiling exclusion. Now, for those of you who are joining us from neighbor islands, this is probably the case on your island too. So different counties have different rules, but check out soil and water conservation districts to see not only how you can advance best management practices, increase your yields, retain your soils, and as we know, soil health is wealth here in agriculture. It also can save you money from permitting process or potentially hefty fines. So next slide, please. Next slide, slide 6, please. Oops. Thank you very much. So the Soil and Water Conservation District directors are elected and appointed. We have a great team here on Oahu. And if you're interested in joining a Soil and Water Conservation District, feel free to stop by the meetings or step on the board. The meetings are monthly, and you may find that it's a good fit for you. So the people who are on the board of directors are elected and appointed. This is a quasi-governmental thing, which is why some positions are appointed, but we also encourage you to join and perhaps support one of your boards as an election, as an elected member. Oftentimes the way that process works is you can step on in an associate capacity. And one of the things that Amanda and I were talking about is this wonderful new wave of farmers that are coming through the islands. We would love to see representation on all the soil and water conservation districts. So perhaps joining your regional board, there are 16 boards across the state, would be a good way to start that, just to learn a little bit more. And there's so much great information and helpful tips that are passed along at these meetings. Next slide, please. So for West Oahu Soil and Water Conservation District, and every district is a little bit different, we support farmers, ranchers, and landowners operating on 1 acre or more. Oftentimes, if we have a lot of folks at the table, we'll prioritize those who are operating on 5 acres or more, but that's never been an issue to this point. We support people with securing cooperator status and conservation planning. Next slide, please. There is a handy dandy chart that I'm going to paste in the chat box that will help you learn a little bit more about the process for becoming a cooperator, as well as securing a conservation plan. The red icon on the screen, which you may not be able to see right now, actually indicates that if you have any violations on your property, you've got to clear those up first before you secure a cooperator agreement or a conservation plan. Then what you would do is you would join a West Oahu meeting. Typically they're held on the 4th Tuesday of each month. For confirmation, you can email Amanda at westoahu.swcd@gmail.com or visit the Lieutenant Governor's calendar to see when the meetings are going to be held. To become a cooperator, you want to understand what is your timeline and why do you want to be a cooperator? Because that's going to help you link up with the best technical service provider, like for instance, Hannah or somebody at Nrcs, who will provide the expertise and guidance in developing your conservation plan. So a conservation plan is a little bit more in depth than a soil conservation plan. I say that with some hesitation because the soil plan is super in-depth look at your soils, but a conservation plan is going to take a look a bit more at your whole farm and your whole farm operation. And quite frankly, Hannah is probably one of the best ones who can explain the difference between the two. It's certainly not me. So you're going to reach out to the experts who can answer all these awesome questions. And then you're going to set up a site visit with your conservation planner, whether you go with NRCS, with HACD, there's Hawaii Association of Conservation Districts, has 3 different conservation planners who provide free services across the islands, or you can work with the Oahu RC&D, who has both fee for service and free services available because of their great partnerships with NRCS and other groups. So after you develop your conservation plan, you present it to the board, and then it is, they can sometimes provide some suggestions, some modifications on how to do things better. And also one of the things that I find most interesting is when the directors provide historical context about what happened historically on your land specifically. And that can provide you with great insights on how you may be able to mitigate for potential weather incidences that happen. For instance, there was this one new farmer who was operating on some land that one of our board members had experience with. He had farmed cucumbers for years and years. And this new farmer was really excited and getting everything set up. And he goes, I just want you to know that occasionally there's saltwater intrusion and that can really damage your crop. And he was like, oh my goodness, thank you. And so he was able to work with his conservation planner to develop some best management practices to mitigate for what might potentially happen in the future. And he also was able to understand why there was so much salt on his land. So
2-minute warning.
just some interesting facts. And next slide, please. And this little graphic, which is also available on our website, can provide some really helpful information for you about who does what, because we realize that you're receiving a whole slew of alphabet soup today. Next slide, please. And I will pass it to Amanda.
Great. Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about one of the programs that we run called Together We Farm. And through that, we provide information and training through an online platform. Well, it's gone online as a result of COVID. We were meeting in person, but we've developed these online training tools and courses on issues such as soil best management practices, the topic of today, also on worker protection standards and pesticide safety. Next slide, please. I'm not sure we have time to go into the video, but we do have a video which shows you step by step how to access the online content. And I'll paste a link in the chat if possible to this website. So you can go directly to this Tovuti platform where we have our courses there. And we'll also share a link to the website afterwards from the presentations, or a link to the video rather afterwards. But basically, Tamara, one of our colleagues, walks you through how to set up an online profile, which would enable you to access the courses. And this is free of charge. Next slide, please. So this is a shot of the course platform landing page. So again, these courses are available to everyone. Anyone can take them. And they basically go through various lessons on these topics. Next slide, please. So you can see some of the topics there, a little bit small, but there's some information. This is in soil health and nutrient management, which of course you've all received a lot of information about that prior, but it's also a good refresher, or it's a good intro for folks that might be joining your operation that kind of want to get familiar. And you'll see the kind of the duration that's listed there. So it tells you how long each segment will take. And within each segment of the videos, there's these short little check-ins, really kind of quizzes and tests to see, what were you able to absorb from the video and from the learning. And so when we run this program, usually in March of each year, we have this available for all farmers to take. And once you have completed a certain number of courses and received certification, we also have available some small grants that can help you to integrate what you've learned through the courses on your farm. Next slide, please. So we'll have more information coming around as the next round of the program develops for Together We Farm, so you can get in touch with us about that. But for now, you're able to access the existing courses that are still online from this past year. So we encourage you to check out some of the links in the chat. Write to us if you have any questions. We'll circulate the video on how to set up a profile, but it's pretty straightforward. And then just to close out in this slide, kind of about how we work with you, just as everyone I think has said, your input as farmers and folks working on the land within the district that we operate within, but also statewide. We're really interested in what your experience have been, so that we can ensure that we have new courses, new training and information that reflects what you want to know. So with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of the crew. That's the last slide. Yeah, thanks.
All right. So thank you. I think we have 3 minutes before closing. We would like to give time for any of the other SWCDs to just give a brief explanation of any of their work that's relevant to soil health, assessment, practices, or plans. Please feel free to post any links to the chat. I also wanted to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. We were able to share a lot of what kind of our agencies and organizations are able to share. So this workshop, out of all of them, really was more heavy on ag service providers. Our past were a lot more farmer to farmer learning. We had farm hosts, and I do want to acknowledge too that the history that we shared started in a lot of these agencies were created from the Dust Bowl, which is really out of a culture that had values and practices that are different than what our heritage of farming is here in Hawaii. So, I just wanted to really stress that we have something unique to share here. We have a lot of knowledge that exists here in our lands and with our people. And this is just one more resource and additional kind of learning that we can pass on today. We also have the Q&A that, if you can use that. And if I know we're a little over time, so I'd just like to invite any of our panelists and any of our anyone on our any of our participants to go ahead and ask any questions. We did kind of address some that were popped up in the Q&A. What we see on our screen right now is some questions that we received from some of the participants who registered. So we were able to receive these great questions. We did try to incorporate them into some of our presentations today. So I am going to go ahead and invite some participants to come off the mute. But first, is there any SWCD that would like to answer any of these questions or just kind of share some of your work briefly with us? And I'm going to launch the poll one more time.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Barbara.
Hi, I just want to let you know that I have some feedback here, just a second, that I'm on the call, and I posted a couple answers in your chat. And also, I just wanted to thank there's abundance of resources here. I'm hoping that the chat can be somehow saved so people can go back and look at it and get the resources off of there. I don't really have any more to add to what the other SWCDs already mentioned. We do the same sorts of things that they do over in Kona area, and every district in Hawaii has a soil water conservation district. So wherever you are, you might try to hook up with them. We work closely with Nrcs, and we're doing some good things here in the future in Kona with regard to soil. So thank you very much for having me and meeting today.
Okay, thank you. I am going to look at our participants to see if there's any questions. Some feedback. Sorry, we're receiving some really interesting feedback. And so if you have a question, you can post it to the Q&A and then I can facilitate the question. Or panelists, if there's any questions on here that you feel that we didn't answer that is related to soil testing and monitoring, please feel free to unmute yourself and answer one of these specific questions. I think we have 1 minute to do this and maybe 1 more minute to look at the same. We also had questions come in for soil planning. So attendees, if you have a question, please post it to the QA. And panelists, if there's one of these questions on here today that you'd like to unmute yourself and answer, please do so. Okay. We did have quite a few questions that came up as we were listening to our presentations. I do realize we're a little over time. Augusto, can you please go to the next slide? This next slide shows some of the soil health plan related questions. So I'll let everyone kind of look at that. We realize that this is a lot of information to kind of sink in. So it might take a while to have, everyone kind of process, what we shared. If there's not any specific questions, then we might just go ahead and move on. I would like to say that this is just the beginning of the conversation. These questions will be saved that we see today. This is what we kind of received when you guys registered, the great questions that you provided us. We will also record the Q&A and the poll and the chat. So all of that is going to be up on our website. So Augusto, next slide, please. Okay, we would like to thank all of our sponsors. We're really excited. We want to make this fun. These sponsors are all providing raffle tickets, and it's been a lot of work to get all of our on-farm video up. And so by this Friday, we'll have everything up. I'm sorry, earlier than that, but by next Friday, what we want to really pose to everyone is, take the knowledge that you've learned and go ahead and look back at the workshop 1, 2, and 3, and then today's will be up there as well. Please, view all those resources. We are offering a raffle for those who are able to either attend or watch all 4 of these workshops. So we just, we really want to value the time of all of our farm hosts and our speakers by asking those who enter the raffle to go ahead and view all those. We are given a $100 gift certificate away to Moku Kitchen. We're given a microbial test away from Solvita. We're giving away some microbial inoculants from EM Hawai'i. We are given cover crop seed away quite a bit away from Ko'olau Seed and Supply, and some fun outdoor gear from Patagonia. This project was funded by the National RC&D and the Atherton Family Foundation. Next slide, please. Here's some upcoming opportunities. Hannah had mentioned that really next year, 2022, we're going to continue some more soil health plans, go more in depth. This workshop series is more of an introduction. Okay, and we're also plugging into a national soil health group, so NACD. So those who just kind of got their feet wet or who have been in this for a while, we are creating, both local and national networks around soil health. Next slide, please. This is where you can access the recorded video. So if you go to our website, you can see the blue drop-down menu where the orange is. So you can go directly from our main website. You can go ahead and search for WFN and our workshops and training, and you can see all past workshops will be located here, along with the PDFs of the presentations and any handouts. And we'll also include links that were shared on the chat. So this will be available. Next slide, please. For those of you who haven't been able to fill out the poll, please fill out the poll. This has been really exciting information to learn. As I'd mentioned before, it's really important for us, really valuable information. If you can fill out number 5 here, this is the information that farmers would most value in a soil health plan for Hawaii. So I see that most people, 70%, would really like to see identification of specific soil health improvement opportunities for their farm. So it looks like most farmers on this call, and we also have some homesteaders and different scale kind of producers who would really like to see just what are those practices, what specific how can I integrate this into my existing operation? There's also some interest in spatial planning. So looking at specifically maps of your farm and your operation. Next, a little more on soil health assessment. So having someone who does this work regularly, who specializes in this, come out and really give you a good baseline on your soil health, and then cost benefit information on soil health practices. We will be able to do some of this next year on some kind of pilot farms. I would like to say thank you so much for everyone who attended this call and who was just, kind of starting this conversation in this learning network. It does take all of us. It does take all of our collective knowledge and practices and experience. The bigger picture is the health and wellness of our communities, starting with our soil. So if there's no further questions, then I would like to conclude today's workshop. And again, just thank you all panelists. I know it takes a lot of time to put these presentations together, and we had some great people to kind of join our network and that we can call on. So thank you for being available. We will be announcing next opportunities. So if you're interested, you can join our newsletter. And I hope you guys, are interested in joining the raffle. It's fun, but we also just really want to make sure that we value the materials and information that we put together from everybody's expertise. So thank you very much. I will now end our webinar, and a hui hou. Thank you.
Thanks, India.
Thank you guys.
Everyone.
Bye.